The blue ribbon was the first thing that moved. 8-year-old June Rowan felt the pinch of a gloved hand close over it before she understood what was happening. She held her slate tight against her chest, the way she always did when the world got too loud, and she did not let go. Beatrice Cray did not raise her voice. She never had to. In Elkbend, quiet was the sound of her winning. "This child will not recite today," she said, loud enough for every parent standing near the exhibition fence to hear. "Unless her father comes and takes her home, her name comes off the roll before this day ends." Nobody moved. A man near the fence took one step forward, and his wife's hand shot out and caught his sleeve. "Not while she's watching," the woman whispered. June heard it. She always heard everything. She was small for 8, with a brown braid coming loose at the end, and a ribbon she had tied herself that morning with hands that shook a little from trying so hard. Nora Witt had been the schoolteacher in Elkbend for 11 days. She knew exactly what it would cost her to step off that porch. She knew Beatrice controlled the board, the schoolhouse key, and, if the whispers were true, half the town's good opinion of itself. She knew all of it, and her feet moved anyway. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said, and she did not look at Beatrice when she said it. She looked past her, to the man just swinging down off his horse at the hitching rail. "And brave. A child doesn't stand that straight for no reason." Cyrus Rowan crossed the yard the way a man crosses a room he has been dreading for years, steady, unhurried, like each step cost something he'd already decided to pay. Dust rode the shoulders of his coat. His hat was already in his hand, as if he'd known before he arrived that he'd need to be ready to apologize to someone. "Mrs. Cray," he said, "take your hand off my girl's ribbon." Beatrice let go, not because he'd asked, because every parent at that fence had just watched her fingers pinch a strip of blue cloth belonging to a child half her size, and even she knew when a picture had gone wrong. June backed into her father's side. Cyrus's hand found her shoulder, gentle, but with a weight to it, like an anchor set down on purpose. He looked at Nora then, and it wasn't gratitude in his face. It was something closer to surprise, the look of a man discovering a window in a wall he'd bricked up years ago. "I was hoping," he said, so quiet only she caught it, "you'd notice me too." Heat rushed up Nora's neck. Not shame, something closer to being caught out. He heard how it landed, and color climbed his own ears. "I mean, you saw June before you saw the talk that follows us. I won't forget that." Beatrice's mouth curved into the kind of smile that made every smile in the room feel like a bill about to come due. "You don't know what you've just defended, Miss Witt," she said, low enough for only the 4 of them to hear. "That child has run off 2 teachers and every fair chance her father had of remarrying." June flinched like she'd been struck. Cyrus's hand tightened once on his daughter's shoulder, then eased. He would not let his daughter feel his anger through his own grip. "That's enough," he said. "No," Nora said. "It isn't enough. It's too much." Beatrice turned and walked toward the schoolhouse, and the crowd parted for her the way water parts for a stone dropped from a height. Nora watched them do it and understood, in that moment, exactly what kind of woman she'd just crossed. Beatrice didn't carry a badge. She didn't need one. She carried obedience, and until today, nobody had ever tested how far it actually reached. That afternoon, a notice appeared on the schoolhouse door, the ink still wet enough to catch the afternoon light. The board would review Miss Witt's fitness at Friday's meeting. Cyrus found her reading it from the yard gate. She moves fast when she means to break someone. Does she always win? He gave a short laugh that had no humor writing under it. Often enough that folks call it peace. Nora folded the notice into her pocket. Then perhaps Elkbend has mistaken quiet for peace. He looked toward the road, where June waited by the horse, small and solemn. "There's a room at the ranch," he said. "My wife's old sewing room. Long table. Quiet. If the board's going to take their time deciding your fitness, June still needs somewhere to read. I'll pay you fair for it." Nora noticed the shape of the offer. Not shelter, not come stay, just work, with wages, in a room named for its use. A careful man's careful sentence. I'll come tomorrow, she said, after lessons. Mrs. Cray will make you pay for that. She already has. The Rowan Ranch sat 3 miles north, where the grass ran silver-green against low hills that never seemed to end. Nora arrived the next afternoon with her primer under one arm and June's abandoned slate under the other. Cyrus met her at the gate, sleeves rolled to the elbow, dust on his forearms from mending a trough that didn't need mending twice in 1 week. He led her past the main house without a word of invitation to step inside it, straight to a small room off the side porch. Its own door, its own path, a scrubbed table, 2 chairs set with careful distance between them. Thought this might suit, he said. Say so if it doesn't. Sunlight lay across the floorboards in a long gold stripe. On the windowsill sat a small cracked china thimble, the only trace left of the woman who'd once sat in this room threading needles instead of watching her daughter learn to read. It suits, Nora said. June came in slow, carrying a biscuit wrapped in cloth like it was something breakable. Pa said teachers forget to eat. Did he? He forgets too. So I know. Cyrus looked hard at the door hinge like it had personally offended him, and Nora pressed her lips together to keep the smile from showing too plainly. June read haltingly. She stopped at the long words and tapped her finger against the slate like she was knocking on a door that wouldn't open. Nora did not rush her. Cyrus busied himself outside with a hinge he'd already fixed twice. When June finally finished the page about the meadowlark, he tipped his hat down low enough to hide his eyes. Again tomorrow? June asked. If your father agrees. He looked up. I'll agree to anything that makes her stand the way she stood today. Something moved in Nora's chest before she could stop it. This, she realized, was the danger Beatrice had warned her about. Not the kind Beatrice meant. Cyrus Rowan wasn't trying to claim anything from her. He was trying very hard not to. And that, somehow, made wanting to stay near him feel more dangerous, not less. Fear travels fast in a small town, and by the next morning, it had already outrun Nora to the schoolhouse. 9 children sat on the benches instead of 21. 3 mothers looked in through the windows, saw Beatrice's buggy stop across the street, and turned around without a word. One father sent his son with a folded excuse that smelled like tobacco and shame. The boy wouldn't meet Nora's eyes. June sat alone in the back corner, twisting the end of her ribbon around one finger. Cyrus had brought her, but he stayed outside the fence, like stepping onto school ground himself might hand Beatrice one more weapon to use. At noon, Nora carried 2 biscuits to where he stood. You wait out here like a man expecting a verdict, she said. Most days I am. From who? His eyes went to the schoolhouse. Everyone who thinks a widower's grief ought to be tidy by now. Everyone who thinks June would be easier if I shipped her east to my sister. Everyone who thinks a man alone with a child is just waiting for the first woman foolish enough to take pity on him. Are you? His eyes came back to hers. No. Pity's just another locked room. That answer stayed with her the whole afternoon, turning over and over, until she understood something about him she hadn't before. Cyrus wasn't slow to feel things. He was slow because everything he felt had to pass through a gate he'd built with his own hands, brick by brick, to keep his daughter from ever being bargained over again. Beatrice found the schoolhouse doorway that evening with a ledger under her arm, a ledger she didn't need, carried only because people obey objects that look official. Every lesson plan comes to me before Monday, she told Nora. Until then, June Rowan sits apart. If Mr. Rowan objects, the board will recommend county placement, where the child can be properly managed. The room went cold. County placement wasn't a school rule. It was a threat to take a child from her own father, and everyone standing near the stove understood it the moment the words left her mouth. Hattie Bell lifted her chin like she might speak. Beatrice opened her ledger and set one gloved finger under a name. The name of Hattie's husband, who hauled freight under a contract Beatrice's family, could end with a single word. Hattie's chin dropped. She found sudden, urgent business with the button on her glove. No one else spoke. Cyrus appeared in the doorway just in time to hear it. His face had gone pale around the mouth, but his voice came out level. "You will not use my daughter to train me." "Then train her yourself, Mr. Rowan," Beatrice said. "This town has been generous long enough." June made a small sound. Nora crossed the room and put her hand flat on the desk beside her. Not on the girl, on the wood, so everyone watching would understand this was about schooling, not possession. "Tomorrow," Nora said. "June sits where she hears best. Any child who needs the same will have the same." Beatrice smiled the smile that made smiles feel like receipts. "Then tomorrow will be interesting." She wasn't wrong. By Thursday, the schoolhouse door was locked, and a fresh notice hung under the bell rope. Miss Nora Witt, suspended pending review. June Rowan, removed from the spring exhibition until her conduct can be certified. June went very pale when she saw it, but she didn't cry. She wrapped both hands around her slate. "Pa," she whispered, "I made Miss Witt lose the school." Cyrus swung down from his horse, and his eyes went first to his daughter, then to Nora, then, slow, deliberate, to Beatrice. "No," he said. "Mrs. Cray did that." Beatrice's smile didn't move. "Careful, Mr. Rowan. The south pasture your herd grazes belongs to my brother. Your lease comes up Monday. A man with a child to feed shouldn't go making enemies of the people who own the grass under his cattle." There it was, the real weapon, the one that had nothing to do with paperwork. Grass, cattle, winter money, June's supper. Nora felt the whole yard go quiet with understanding, and nobody said a single word. Cyrus's jaw set hard. "My herd is not your rope." "Everything is a rope," Beatrice said, "when a man is desperate enough." That night, a stagecoach ticket appeared on Nora's bed at the boarding house, already paid for. "No shame in going before Mrs. Cray ruins you proper," Mrs. Bell said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Who paid for it?" Mrs. Bell's silence answered before her words did. "She wants you gone before the board meets." Said an empty chair's easier to vote against. Nora sat with the ticket in her hand a long time after Mrs. Bell left. It was a kindness and a surrender, folded into the same square of paper. A knock came at the back door. Cyrus stood on the step in the rain, hat in both hands, water darkening his shoulders. "I heard about the ticket," he said. "Did you come to talk me into using it?" "Part of me came to beg you not to. That part's got no manners." He looked at her the way a man looks at a stampede he can feel coming from somewhere behind his own ribs. "The better part came to say you owe us nothing. Not June. Not me. Not this town that let a woman shame a child sooner than cross her." "And what do you want, Mr. Rowan?" The rain ticked against the porch roof for a long moment before he answered. "I want my daughter to read in a room where nobody calls her a burden. I want to stop living like loving her makes me unfit for anything else. And I want to ask you to stay, because I want you here, not because I need a teacher." Nora's fingers closed around the ticket until the paper bent. "That's a dangerous thing to say to a woman with no position left in this town." "I know it. That's why I won't ask for your answer tonight." She looked down at the ticket in her hand. A safe road, a paid seat, a clean way out of everything Beatrice Cray was building to bury her under. Then she thought of June at that locked door, blaming herself for the cowardice of grown men and women who should have known better. "I won't leave before Friday's meeting," she said. Cyrus closed his eyes, just once. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Nora said. "I'm not planning on going quietly." Cyrus spent that evening hauling feed sacks out of the washroom and into the barn, clearing space so the table could hold more than one child. When Nora reached for the sack he'd already claimed, he gave her a look. "I'm capable of dragging trouble myself, Mr. Rowan." "Then choose your own trouble, Miss Witt." She picked the heaviest sack in the room, and June laughed from the doorway, the first laugh Nora had heard out of her without an apology folded in behind it. Cyrus heard it too. He went very still, and something in his face softened in a way that made Nora look away before hope got too visible on her own. Later, while June washed slates at the pump, Nora found a framed photograph turned face down on the washroom shelf. She didn't touch it. She only looked at it long enough for Cyrus to notice her looking. "My wife," he said. "Mara. June looks like her when she's angry." "That sounds like praise." "It is." He turned the frame upright himself, his hand resting on it a moment. "You don't have to hide her for my sake." I was hiding her from myself. Nothing improper passed between them in that moment. Just a man standing by a shelf, a woman standing by a table, and a dead woman's photograph finally allowed to face the room again. Hooves broke the quiet outside. A hired rider from Beatrice's brother stopped at the pump and held out a folded notice without dismounting. "South pasture closes at sundown tomorrow. Rowan cattle off by then." Cyrus read it once, folded it, and put it in his coat. "You could still close this room," Nora said. "I could. Tell her you misunderstood." "I won't." His eyes went to the pump, where June stood holding a dripping slate like it was something precious. "Because I heard my daughter laugh in her mother's room today. Because you didn't ask me to put that photograph away. If I trade all this for grass, I'll have cattle and no home worth driving them back to." Nora had no answer for that. She only took the folded notice from his hand when he offered it and wedged it under the leg of the wobbling lesson table. It didn't prove anything. It just steadied the place where the children would write. Friday came with 2 deadlines standing on either side of it like fence posts. At noon, the board could end Nora's post for good. By sundown, Beatrice's brother could close the pasture that kept Cyrus's herd alive through winter. Beatrice arrived to find the schoolhouse steps full, not with a crowd waiting for speeches, but with benches under the cottonwoods, hauled there before sunrise by a rancher who'd risked his own grazing rights for every mile of the trip. June sat at the front with her slate. 5 other children sat beside her, their parents standing behind them, uneasy but present. Beatrice climbed down from her buggy, a paper in one hand, fury banked low under her hat brim. Beside her stood Alma, her niece, pale as a pressed flower, eyes fixed on the dirt. "This gathering is unauthorized," Beatrice said. "It's a lesson," Nora said. "Parents may watch a lesson. Not from a suspended teacher. Then from a private tutor, paid by Mr. Rowan, for his own child. Any other parent is free to remove their child right now." No one moved. Beatrice turned on Cyrus instead. "Your lease is ended. My brother's pasture closes to you by sundown." A ripple ran through the gathered parents. Everyone in Elkbend knew what that pasture meant to a man with a herd and a winter ahead of him. Cyrus stepped forward, not in front of Nora, but beside her. "Then it's ended." Beatrice blinked, thrown for the first time that morning. She'd expected bargaining. Fear. Not this. "Think carefully, Mr. Rowan. A widower with a difficult daughter can't afford pride. Alma would bring order to your house. My family would bring grass back to your cattle." Alma flinched like she'd been slapped with her own name. Cyrus took his hat off. "My house doesn't need order bought with my child's shame. I won't marry a woman to keep a pasture." Alma's eyes filled, not with hurt, but with something closer to relief. Beatrice's face sharpened to a point. "Alma, tell them what you told the board." Alma stared at the dirt. "Tell them." Alma lifted her head just far enough for Nora to see the fear underneath it. "I won't say it again." June stood up. Nora almost reached for her, then stopped herself. This wasn't proof to be produced. This was a person choosing something. She'd promised never to rush her. June looked at her father. Cyrus nodded, his own face gone pale. "I want to read," June said. Beatrice gave a short, hard laugh. "A performance won't change board authority." "It isn't a performance," Nora said. "It's a lesson." June opened her slate to the Meadowlark page. Her voice shook on the first line. A boy near the front snickered, then went quiet under his mother's hand on his shoulder. June reached the long word she always feared. Beatrice watched the pause the way a hawk watches a field. Nora didn't give her the word. Cyrus didn't rush to rescue her. The whole gathering seemed to hold its breath at once. June sounded it out. Slowly. Correctly. She did it, Hattie Bell's son whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. Hattie stepped out from behind the bench. "Mrs. Cray, my boy stumbles worse than that. and you never once called him unfit." Another father took off his hat. "Mine too." Beatrice lifted the paper in her hand like it still meant something. "The board has procedures." "The board is 3 parents and you," Hattie said. "My husband is one of them. He's at the freight yard right now because you told him this meeting moved to Monday." The words landed harder than any notice ever could. Beatrice hadn't just enforced rules. She'd hidden the meeting itself. "I delayed confusion," Beatrice said, too quickly. "These people don't understand governance." "We understand our children," Hattie said. Nora turned to face the parents. Her hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. "I can't force this town to keep me. I can't unlock that schoolhouse without permission. But if you want your children taught today, Mr. Rowan has offered his own table until a lawful meeting can be held. No child will be mocked for stopping on a hard word. No parent will be charged who can't pay. And no woman on any board will decide a child is a burden just because she learns at her own pace." Beatrice's eyes cut to Cyrus. "You'll let this woman speak for your house." "I asked her to speak in my house," Cyrus said, not looking away from Nora. "Today I'm asking her to speak for it, if she chooses to." That was the moment Nora understood exactly what he was risking. Not just grass, not just money, but the guarded life he'd spent years building around himself and his daughter, thrown open in front of the very people who'd watched him grieve and called it strange. "I choose to teach," Nora said, "and I choose not to be quiet." The parents moved, not all at once, but one at a time, the way water finds a crack and then a river follows it. Hattie first, then the father with his hat, then Mrs. Bell, who walked straight up to Nora and took the torn stagecoach ticket from her hand before tearing it clean in half. "That ticket was cowardice dressed up as kindness," Mrs. Bell said. "I'll put the money toward chalk instead." Beatrice reached for June's slate, maybe to end the scene, maybe just to have something in her hands. Nora caught it first. "No," she said. "You've taken enough from children today." The walk from the schoolhouse to the ranch became its own kind of vote. First Hattie and Mrs. Bell followed. Then the father with his hat lifted his daughter onto his wagon and turned north instead of home. 2 boys carried the benches between them. Alma walked last, still shaking, but walking in daylight instead of under her aunt's instruction for the first time anyone could remember. Beatrice followed as far as her buggy would take her, calling out that every parent would regret this disorder. Nobody answered. The silence that followed her wasn't fear this time. It was refusal, the kind that starves a thing that's only ever survived on being fed. At the ranch, Cyrus opened the washroom door and stood aside, letting the children go in ahead of him. He let June choose the seat nearest the window. He let Nora decide where the primers went. Only then did he step inside himself. For a man who'd spent years keeping the world at arm's length, that was as public a vow as he knew how to make. By noon, 12 children sat crowded around the long table, boots not quite fitting underneath it, voices filling a room that had gone silent since Mara Rowan died. 3 parents dropped coins into a coffee tin for chalk. 1 brought firewood. 1 promised to speak to her husband before the board voted. Small gestures, better than grand ones. Things Beatrice had never ordered and could never take credit for. Cyrus stood at the fence afterward, looking out over the pasture he was about to lose. "How bad is it?" Nora asked, coming to stand beside him. "Bad enough. Not ruin. I can drive the herd west if I sell 2 steers early." "Because of me." "Because I let Beatrice believe fear would always work," he said. "That was my doing, long before you ever came to town." That evening, the lawful board meeting happened with the schoolhouse doors thrown wide and every bench full. Beatrice stood at the front like the room still belonged to her. Hattie's husband sat at the long desk with the other 2 board members. Beatrice's brother stood near the cold stove, arms folded, until he saw how many ranchers had walked in behind Cyrus. Alma stood beside Nora, both hands twisted into her skirt. Hattie spoke first. "Mrs. Cray told my husband the meeting moved. Told parents June was being removed for safety. Told me his freight work could be reviewed if I confused the matter any further." "Sit down," Beatrice said. No one did. Alma took one step forward, her voice shaking so badly Nora nearly moved to steady her. She kept standing anyway. My aunt told me Cyrus Rowan needed a wife more than he needed a teacher, Alma said. She said if I helped make June look unmanageable, he'd have no choice but to take me into his house. She said my uncle would close the south pasture until he understood what order costs. Every face in the room turned toward Beatrice. The girl is confused, Beatrice said. I was confused when I repeated your words, Alma said. I'm not confused now. Beatrice looked to her brother. Tell them this is family business. A rancher near the stove stood first. Two more rows beside him before her brother could answer. If pasture is how your family manages schools, the rancher said, then no Rowan herd will be the only herd you lose. Beatrice's brother looked around the room at faces that had already decided. He pulled the pasture notice from his coat, tore it once, then again, and dropped the pieces into the cold stove. South gate stays open. Beatrice stared at him like he'd struck her. The vote came fast after that. Hattie's husband raised his hand to remove Beatrice's chair. A second hand rose. A third. Beatrice kept her gloved fingers closed around the schoolhouse key until Hattie held her palm out and simply waited. You won't keep order without me, Mrs. Cray. We've seen your order now. The key dropped into Hattie's palm. A small sound, metal against skin, but the whole room heard it anyway. No sheriff came. No judge stood up to declare Nora right. The town simply watched Beatrice lose the only tool she'd ever needed. Fear dressed up as something official. The next morning, Nora walked out to the ranch expecting a washroom full of children. Instead, she found it empty, except for June and Cyrus. For one cold second, fear moved through her, until June pulled back the kitchen curtain and showed her the yard full of children crossing toward the house, lunch pails and slates in hand, parents walking beside them in plain daylight, no wagons to hide behind. Pa said school starts after breakfast, June said, but I told him teachers forget to eat. On the kitchen table sat 3 plates. Not 2, 3. Beside the third plate lay Nora's primer and the blue ribbon slate. Cyrus stood by the stove, sleeves rolled, hair still damp from the pump, looking as nervous as a boy and as steady as a man who had finally made peace with being seen. Miss Witt, he said, I've got no pasture left to impress you with, and no easy year ahead of me. I've got a daughter who reads slow, a house that still remembers grief, and a table that seems to have made room for you without asking me first. He turned the third chair out from the table. When the term's done, if you're willing, may I court you properly? Nora touched the back of the chair. You noticed I was hungry. His mouth curved, just slightly. I noticed more than that. June looked between them and, for once, didn't try to carry the moment for either one. She simply set the blue ribbon slate down at the head of the table, the same slate Beatrice had once tried to take from her hands. Yes, Nora told him, as the children crowded the open doorway behind her. You may court me properly. After breakfast. She opened the door herself, and this time, no parent stepped aside to let her through. They just walked in beside her,